Hi, I'm Emmet Lewis and this is Isaac. You're probably wondering where my beard has gone, but you know, new year, new me, something like that anyway. So anyway, I decided to ditch the guru look, and in celebration of that we are releasing a big ass front split program, which is going to cover everything you need to know about front splits and getting it. It's going to suit most people. If you have not got your front splits, we'll get you there. So first thing, I want to explain some features of the front split and some points you might get stuck on. We are looking at the as close to square as possible front split. The turned out front split or the dance front split is a separate thing. That's perfectly fine. We're not doing that here. We just want this one. It's more transferable to acrobatics and tumbling and other stuff. Not that the other one is in any way, shape or form wrong. It is just different. So what we're looking for in the front split is we want hip extension and we want hip flexion. We are generally, if we look at the leg angles, they are never going to be an actual 180 degrees on a floor front split. They are going to be closer to 170, 160 degrees, depending on the size of your quads and thighs. Perfectly fine. So if we just look at some ideal ranges, say on our back leg, we have somewhere between 25 and 40 degrees of hip extension. And then if we want to be 160, 170 degrees, so say I had a 25 degrees, 30 degrees here at the back, and I want 160 degrees of a split, that means I need 130 degrees of hip flexion here. So depending on how flexible you are, we kind of max out our hip extension quite early on, then whatever we're missing, we make up with the hamstring. It's one of these things for most people. I'm very confident saying most people are able to get an over front splits. Not everyone's able to get an over middle split, but most people get an over front split to a certain degree. One of the key things we want to look out for is there's always this visual thing of like the chest is up, so people think the spine is neutral. If we look at Isaac's spine, we can see he's extended in the lumbar. Then if I fixate his pelvis here, and if he leans forward into neutral, he's actually that degree, that is spine closer to neutral there, and that's what's giving, as you can see, there's much more hamstring demand than there is on the back leg. So you have to bear that in mind. If your front split is stalled, there's generally hamstrings more than hip extension once you have the hip extending nicely. So can you just come up and I want to explain the stall point. So there is a stall point that people get stuck at about here in the split for quite a long time. What happens if we look at the angle here, the leg itself, if you're pushing forwards into the split and you can't do it, or you're close to the level of your max flexibility, the femur is hitting the back of the pelvis at about 90 degrees. So as you push forward, it just feels like the shape is going forward and it doesn't feel like it's moving. You can feel stuck for quite some time. So what we want to get, particularly when this is a very common stick point, is we need to get the idea that as the front leg's going down, it is flexing and rotating at the hip. And as a side product of that, the leg goes forward. This is it. It's not I'm trying to go straight down and push the leg forward. It's I'm flexing the hip, that like suck the femur back into the socket like we've done with the active straight leg raises, and rotate and move the shape around. That's what we're looking for. So just watch out for that one. It's always a rotational movement in this, and it's never going to be really passive. We always want to have some degree of like muscles on the inside of the quads, up near the short adductors, sucking the hip back in, and the glutes on the back leg working. You can relax in it once you get there, but when we're doing stuff, we always have that kind of, this is what's controlling the rotation of like, pull the leg back into the socket, let it rotate, and push the glute, push this hip forward with the glute. So there's a lot going on this. We're going to look at the exercises in a second, and other than that, enjoy. So there is one of these things before we get a front split. One of the first things we need to get on control is strength in the front leg. It is very, very lacking, even for people who do hanging leg raises and can blast them out and toast the bars and stuff like this. We want the pure hip flexor power. A lot of people cheat this in a certain way. So one of the first things we want to do is be able to lift our leg to at least 90 degrees without leaning backwards. To test this out, you will stand back to the wall. You want about parallel to the ground. You don't need to lean the wall, but it's just to make sure you're not leaning back. Then stand up, lift. Can I get my leg close to parallel to the ground? If you can't, if it's coming up to 45 degrees, this kind of thing, you've got some work to do, but we have the fix right here. So what we're going to look at is combining two techniques. We are going to use an overcoming isometric to activate the ranges of motion. So that is pushing against something that cannot move. I'm just going to use my hands here. If you're doing it by yourself, some bands can be set up, a plate if it's not too uncomfortable, some sandbags, improvise. You can also like use stall bars and just put your foot on the rung you want to work at and then just push up against the bar underneath. There's a lot of options on this, just be a bit creative. So I'm just going to lift his leg up and put it up here. First thing we want to do is we're going to keep the hip down. There'll be a tendency for this to happen in this motion. You must not do it. At the same time, you must not let the leg turn out like this. It has to stay knee straight up to the ceiling. The other thing is you want to have a tiny bit of a forward lean, and the forward lean comes from sucking the hip back, or the femur back into the hip. That's our first one. So put the weight here. I'm just going to put here or here, wherever's comfortable. We could also pin it down. So I'm going to pin it. Isaac is going to try and lift as hard as he can against me. Push, 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 push. You really want to find the second gear in these. After about 4 seconds, you'll find you should be able to contract harder. Don't get lazy. We'll relax. We're going to do this 3 times. Push, 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 push. I much prefer doing these short ones than longer held contractions. People who've been to the workshop will understand why. Relax, so we do 10 seconds, 10 seconds, 10 seconds. We're just doing 2 for speed. We remove the weight, and now you're going to do lift-offs with incredibly good technique to a target, either a visual one or a partner. You will have down, you're going to try and hold everything for 3 seconds. You want to begin to eradicate the bottom knee extend bending as soon as you can. Once you make contact with the target, or once you visually go higher, these will get a bit like, as you start reaching depths, they will get a bit sloppy. That is okay, as long as it is not a massive slop. Can you show a really bad cheated one? Like once you start doing this kind of stuff to lift the leg, it's game over. But a little bit of sloppiness is okay here, as long as you feel the muscles that were activated in this doing a hell of a lot of work. Once again, the height we have set here. If you're not super flexible, this is very difficult for you. You can start with your leg like 20 degrees towards the ground and work there. These will develop very quickly, but we just want to be able to hold that leg up 30 seconds, 90 degrees to the torso, parallel to the ground, there or thereabouts. It's very difficult to get beyond this point for most of you into active flexibility, to get like the standing front leg scale. It's a work of art and coaching thing, so don't be too hard if it just doesn't improve, because if we think about it, when we're straight out, we are at the longest part of leverage, so it can be stuck at this point for a long time, but getting to that point should come quite quickly. So in this, we are looking at the Silver Leap protocol, which is SLP, which is short for shorten, lengthen, pulse. It is one of the things we don't really talk about a lot, is layering stretch methods into a single set. We're going to look at a very basic variation where we will use the shortening side of the joint in an overcoming isometric manner to fire that up, the lengthening side of the joint to push in the various vectors, and then we will start with the pulsing type stretching. So it's kind of an advanced, if you're familiar with the head to toe and the normal ballistics, it is an advanced variation of this, so hopefully you enjoy. We're going to set up with the leg on a box is good for this, but you could do it on the floor, but I prefer the box because it just gives a bit more play on the angles. Isaac is going to flex his foot hard, turn on the quad, and he's going to block something. So we're using a yoga block, keep the head down, something solid in between, could be a foam roller, could be anything else, and he's going to try lift the leg up. The hands aren't pulling, they're just there for support. And he's going to try collapse that against the block as hard as possible. You want to get to the point where you're shaking. You're going to hold that for 10 seconds. You're going to relax. You're going to take the block out. Now you're going to set into stretch. You're going to ask yourself, where do you feel the stretch? Is it forward, or is it to the side, or is it like in? You're going to push the leg in that direction. So push the leg through the thing. It's very similar to contract, relax stretching. It is that. Hard as you can, 10 seconds on the lengthening side. Bam. Hold, relax. And now you're going to perform 20 pulses, flexing the foot, actively using that newfound range to get yourself deeper. You'll do that, so I'll just stop there for completeness. Then we're going to pick up our block again. We're going to set it up deeper this time. So we're really at the limit of what we contract. Tuck the chin, make sure everything's nice, long head, and contract. Crush that block. 10, 9, 8. This idea. Pause, remove the block. Ask yourself, where do you feel it? As you see, it instantly goes deeper on this. Where do you feel it now? Push the leg through. 5, 6, 10, you know what you're doing. Stop, and then 20 pulses again. You can pull with the hand slightly on the pulses. But this is the idea of this set. You can stop there. So this is very intense hamstring stretching, but it's one of the best methods we've ever found on stretching the hamstrings.
It's fucking potent as fuck.
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
So in this variation of the hamstring, it's credit where credit's due. It comes from Liv from Stretch Therapy. We've tweaked it slightly just for our purposes, but that was the original source of it. It also mimics a lot of what you see in a lot of Chinese martial arts when they would be, you'll have a kicking drills where if we think the split goes this way, so our kick would go this way, we also start kicking to the side, and that's what gets a bit of lateral hamstring flexibility. Can also serve as a bit of nerve floss. This one is one of those ones, if you need it, you will know all about it in the first couple of repetitions for this. So we're going to set up, with the leg will come up front, and then we're going to, like we talked about, suck the hip back into the socket so much it turns the pelvis towards the leg. So the leg does not come up towards your same side ear. It starts going, you're thinking the little toe is coming towards the ear. At the same time, we want to turn on the quad, flex the foot, so you might need to come closer to the box on your setup. Then we're going to reach, our opposite hand is going to reach forward, but we're not going to let the torso bend. We're just going to let the reach come from the hip flexing. Just be really strict about this. So like pull the hip back and pull yourself into it. We'll reach forward, down. So turn the pelvis even more. Don't go down so far. Come out. And just use the target of I can touch my little finger, can touch with the next joint. This idea. Keep the chin tucked as well. You'll see a lot of weird things will start to happen in the body to get out of the stretch. You should feel a very intense sensation on the side of the hamstring if you're getting it right, possibly onto the IT band. This is what we're looking for. This one we're going to do in these reach, hold for 1 second, out manner. So it's more of a mobilization, I would say, than a long held position. Other than that, it's 20, 30 reps and you'll know all about it. Enjoy. So in this exercise, we are looking at extending the long lunge and some of its features and how it relates to side split. The long lunge is to the front split as the horse stance is to the side split. It's a very cool exercise. We're looking for a certain something in it, and it will give the flavor of our front split. It'll give you an idea of how much hamstring flexibility you need to develop and how much hip extension you have. What we're looking for in the first place is just to get the legs into the front split line and then see what happens. How much back arch do we need? So we already know how to do the back. We're now just lifted up. We can have the hands on the leg. We could hold some ski poles. We can also hold the hands out to the side. We want this just to be nice. We want it to be as close to straight as possible. This idea before we start extending it out. First thing, it's generally pretty good to be able to do this for about 90 seconds, but it can take its toll, so always just work up to it, come down. It also just, as I said, it gives the flavor of your front split. If your front split is going to be turned out, you'll see it in this first. If you have really good hip extension, so you don't need as much hamstring, you'll see it here first. That will be showing by the amount of curve in the lumbar spine. So there's a lot of things to play with in this, so just make sure you get the flavor of your front split. This in and of itself is a pretty good position anyway, so enjoy. In this exercise, we are looking at developing the active side of the back leg in the front split. What you want to do on this one is we need to have a contact point. So this becomes our task. If you're familiar with my workshops and the concept of task-oriented flexibility, we want to have something that we can make contact with. It can be a kettlebell, a set of blocks, a bench, whatever you got to hands, whatever works for your flexibility level. You're going to come forward and set up. You're going to start to set up square. So whatever you're lacking, or if you feel things pinching, remember, suck back on the lead leg, get the hips as square as possible. It will always have this feel that like the torso rotation needed to square the hips will always be slightly towards the lead leg when you're beginning, because if it's generally a rule of thumb is like if the hips need to shift 20 degrees, the torso will need to be 40 degrees to help counter all the rotation that comes from turning. So just bear that in mind. The other thing is we want to have the weight as evenly spread as possible from the big toe to the little toe. If you feel all the weight in the big toe, it means you are rotating the leg out. So that's your first hint. It's like, oh, it's all in the big toe. It's also, if your feet aren't strong enough for this one, it will build some good toe strength, but you can wear shoes to support the foot to begin with. Now, what Isaac's going to do is put both his hands on his thigh to begin with. You could also use ski poles, but whatever works for you. You're going to try, keep the contact point here. That is not going to lift. You're going to push the heel back using the glutes. At the same time, pull yourself forward with the lead leg to maintain that rotation and maintain that lock in. Come down, knees go down. The goal is to get the leg completely straightened out the back while maintaining your contact point. This will take some time. What you will see people doing is, what we want is, if you lift a centimeter off the ground, but with good form, are you still keeping your contact point? Yeah, keep the contact point. Just 1 centimeter off the ground, but not extended. That is what we're looking for in this. We're not really looking for a full thing and then coming up. You will see a variation when you come up higher. That's okay. It's not what we're doing right now. It's max out the glute. At the same time, keep this contraction at the front leg, fixating the hips and stopping them turning out. This stretch is what I consider one of the strongest solo hip flexor stretches we have in our arsenal. It's the only thing I've found that's better than it is the stretch therapy partner work. But for a solo hip flexor stretch, this is the king. This is the emperor of stretches. You want to make sure you've got a lot of control on this. You will need to use some weight. I've got 12 kg here. I've been doing this a while, maybe start with 5. What we're looking for is we have this idea that we need the weight to be driving us down. At the same time, we need to be actively using our glutes. We're using our glutes to overcome the hip flexors in assistance with the weight. This is the goal. It's like I'm driving forward. I want to be also with the lead leg curling myself forward. Now on the lead leg, you might get a bit of a pinch of some flesh kind of getting wound up. It's okay to abduct it slightly to the side for this, as long as you don't lose the square on the back leg, as long as that's still on the same plane it was. If it shifts off a bit lateral or this kind of thing, we want to avoid that. Other than that, take it really gentle with this when you start, but it is very, very good. We call it the seeing through time hip flexor, because when you get into it, you will see through time. So to set this up, I'm going to set up near the wall. So I've set up about 90 degrees with the leg. I'm going to come up the wall a certain amount. I'm going to settle in. We want to be going forward in this stretch, this direction. So don't worry too much about that, or distance from the wall. Just get where it's comfortable. You don't need to be knee into the wall. You can eventually, but when you're starting out, start where I am or even a bit lower. I'm going to take my weight in the same side as the extending leg. I'm going to hold it straight up overhead. Lock my shoulder. Now we don't need to push it up like a handstand, but slight bit of elevation direction will help. Kettlebells are better here because the bell is slightly on the side of the body that we are trying to open, or the counter side. So I'm going to go forward. Squeeze my glute, drive my hip forward, forward, forward. Now I pull with my back leg. The front leg is just along for the ride. It's this whole hanging knee raise type motion, or knee to chest kind of motion is what we're looking for, and that's what drives it. So lock in, I'll set up and make sure I'm losing balance when I'm chatting. Go up, set my hip as square as I can, go forward, pull myself forward, hold 2, 3, pull myself out. As you get deeper into this, rushing along here, you want to go further forward with the lead leg, and you want to start thinking leg curl into the depth of the position. So go down, get square, pull in, pull, 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 squeeze the glute hard, pull out. Down, pull in, squeeze the glute hard, pull out. Very strong stretch, very unpleasant to begin with, but enjoy. So in the next exercise, we are looking at the long lunge leading into a front split. It is what we do in place of a suspended iso front split. We would see, you'll see people with like locking out the front knee and hanging out of the back of the joint. that's fine. It's not what we're looking for in this exercise. I prefer this one because it gives us a bit more options, that we can bend the front knee as well as push the heel to the ground. So it gives us a bit of play on the other functions of the hamstring as much as anything else. The other thing that's very nice about this is we set the hip square and then we move backwards into the split. This means that you're more likely to keep the hip square than if you push forward. The tendency will be like, front leg goes forward, 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 body goes task and turns you out. What we want more than anything else is to keep, boom, square. We've got our headlights on our hips, they're pointing forward. So the first variation of this is like the lift off. We're going to keep the hip square. We're going to set up in this long lunge position. You're going to need to flip up onto your heel at some point. Unless you have a really good point, you're just not going to be able to keep the foot down. This also means that it limits the depth you can go with balance, control, and strength. So it's an exercise, it really gives on that thing that is like, until all of these things started rising at the same rate, you won't be able to go deeper. And if you do push the depth beyond what you can control, you just fall out to the side. When you're learning, ski poles, get your sticks, get some blocks, use some chairs, get used to it. Afterwards, I want you to be able to do this completely free, hands out to the side. So, the other thing is we want to make sure when we step backwards that we don't step into line, that we're still just in our walking gait, our split stance kind of width, so we're not in a tightrope. This will be the front split. If we think the front split is just coming up, so just bear that in mind. So, long lunge, go back, get a taste of what my front split looks like. Here, rock up onto the heel. Now we start hands out to the side or onto the knee. Then we start shimmying the back leg back, suspend. Now we've got two things we can do here. We can push the legs back against each other, or we can pull them towards each other. So I can push my toe and heel together, or I can push them apart. This will have different effects on what you're looking for. One of them will suit you better. It's this idea, go back further, hold, extend. This idea gives us a nice controlled access to the iso front split. As everything else raises, you will go deeper. Very nice, very controlled. It's also the motion that when we get this idea of as I said earlier, if the squat and the horse stance are to side split, this is the split squat to front split. So in this, we have the other variation where I will go into the split. And I'm going to start contracting and expanding and doing kind of very extended split squats. So I'm here, shimmy back, up onto the heel, get set, pull together, knee goes down, push apart, back up, pull together, knee goes down. Then if you're brave, it turns into depulsing. Save the pulsing for later maybe, but this is the direction it goes in. Enjoy. So in this exercise, what we would typically use it for is when you feel like the back leg or the hip extension, maybe you have good hip extension and stuff like the long lunge and everything is okay there, but you can't find it in the front split. So maybe your hamstring flexibility is fine, but the back leg is lagging. So what we'll do is you can do this flat on the ground, but generally we want to raise up a bit. Sit on a yoga block, 2 yoga blocks, 3, be comfortable, put them under the lead leg. And then what comes interesting is that you're going to squeeze the back glute. We're going to use the whole back side of the body as the shortening zone of this to help open up the front leg. It's also very good if you have your split, but it's turned out and you want to start squaring it up. So this is one of the key ones. We'll square the hips up, we'll get nice, just nice into it. Suck in as we do at the front. Squeeze the glute hard. It's really about the back of the body. Now you're just going to start leaning backwards. It has a feeling that you're pushing forward. You're not trying to go super far back to begin with, but this is the idea. So we're holding here, we're squeezing the glute constantly, and this is what we're getting into this. For this one, come out. Generally we'll start with some iso holds, but we can also just do it as a repetition based format where we would go in, squeeze, max out really hard, back in. Once you feel you have this one, it can be advantageous to start increasing leverage. So we could start with the hands up overhead. If we hold them here, hugging ourselves, or doing this if you feel like it. We can start putting the hands straight up overhead, which will just might be a bit intense for Isaac and the level he's at, but we'll see if we can demo. We're just going to go back, hold, 2, 3, down. It's also interesting if you were to do this with the arms up overhead and take a photo and then flip it 90 degrees so it's in a bridge orientation. You can see how far off or how narrow your bridge in a split could potentially be. So there's a few things to look at in this as well, just for a bit of interest. Keep following along with the program and enjoy. We're now looking at an exercise we call the front split slide. It is a very good one for finishing off the front split. Once you get to the stick point that we talked about earlier, this is one of the exercises we will use to get over it. It's always going to be personal at this point what exercise works, but we're going to try this one out. So we need a floor slider or something to slide on. You're also, when you're learning this, I'd like you to have some kind of ski pole kind of thing going on, or some kettlebell, something just to support some weight, because it can get heavy quick. So it's just, as you get used to it, you can get rid of them. You want to be able to do it free. You want to be able to put the hands up overhead, and if you're feeling brave, hold a 20 kg bar, which I have seen. So what Isaac is going to do is he is going to suck the leg back into the socket of the front leg. That's the first thing. So he's setting up this rotational movement we talked about in the hamstring. It's sticking, it's like twerk on one leg, the other hip is going to squeeze. So you've got a bit of two things at once going on. He's going to slide forward. When he reaches a pause there, just for a moment, then he's going to, when you hit the first stick point in this motion, you're going to squeeze the back glute and then suck and think, rotate the hips to let yourself go further forward. Pause, whatever you go forward. And now the motion comes from driving the knee, like you're doing a hanging knee raise, to pull yourself back up. So pull yourself back up that way. At the same time, you're keeping a level of constant pressure from the hamstring at the front. So it's working. Everything on the front leg is active in some way, has a role to fulfill. So we're going to go into this motion, drive forward. So we go into the first, we reach the first stick point, drive ourselves forward, however that forward that is. Use a target on the ground. Hold, 2, 3. Knee to chest. Maybe have some rubber tips on your sticks. So we have this idea. We go in as far as we can in a kind of casual manner. Then we drive ourselves forward. Generally, you will pick a spot on the ground with your slider. Slide. Try to exceed it. Come back. The target you want to pick wants to be 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters further. You don't need to go super deeper, but just that every rep is either gaining or consistently hitting depth. What you'll find per set is the first half of the set will go deeper. The second half of the set will just pause there. At the end, you want to finish with an isometric contraction, just holding for about 10 to 30 seconds. But, you know, take it casual to begin with.